Welcome to the 2023 PSU Cleantech Challenge Finals, brought to you by Portland State University and Wells Fargo.
And to host today's festivities at the Native American Student and Community Center. Portland State is located in the heart of downtown Portland, Oregon, in Multnomah County. Today we honor the indigenous people whose traditional and ancestral homelands we stand on: the Multnomah, the Cathlamet, Clackamas, Tumwater, Watlala bands of Chinook, and the Tualatin Catalupa, and many other indigenous nations of the Columbia River. It is important to acknowledge the ancestors of this place and to recognize that we are here because of the sacrifices forced upon them. In remembrance of these communities, we honor their legacy, their lives, and their descendants. The teams presenting today represent the innovative spirit we see throughout PSU and the Portland community. It's an amazing community of people who make things like this, the Cleantech Challenge, possible. Please allow me to extend a huge thank you to all the people who made this possible: our student teams, our judges, the speakers, our interviewers, and many others who gave so generously of their time and insights. The Center for Entrepreneurship exists to support students along their innovative journey, but it's truly my privilege to be here. I'm continually amazed at the innovative spirit and steadfastness of these students. And I know you will also leave today understanding how bright the future looks with problem solvers like these in joining us. It's my privilege to introduce the Master of Ceremonies today, Topher Burns, the founder of Climate Curious and a dedicated supporter to innovation here at Portland State.
All right, so we're all in this together. We're going to spend a little bit of time together. I'm not afraid to call people out, embarrass people, so I'm only going to do this once, though. In order to do it, I'm not going to do it "I can't hear you" type of moment, but I do want to feel some oomph. So, Cleantech Challenge, how are we feeling today? All right. Good. Cool. So, at Cleantech Challenge, we're so excited to be here. I organized with a group called Climate Curious, and we're really inspired by Abigail and the rest of the Center for Entrepreneurship, the really hard work that they're doing. It takes a lot of organization, advocation, education in order to get students to where they are here today. So big round of applause for Abigail and the Center for Entrepreneurship. So Climate Curious is a group that myself and a few other folks who are here are a part of. We talk about ourselves as Portland's Climate Tech Social Club. Our goal is to bring together people that are a part of Portland's climate tech scene, maybe breaking down barriers between the different verticals that exist within professionals, as well as making it easier for people who are curious about working in climate or bringing that into their own life to access that. So we have partnered with the Center for Entrepreneurship and other events before. We've actually had the privilege of seeing some of the teams who are going to be presenting today, maybe work through like a second draft. If today we're seeing a final draft, we saw them at like second draft stage, so we're really excited to see the final product here. So before we get into it and welcome the first team, I wanted to share a little bit about what all of these teams have been up to. Over the past few months, they've been laying down the groundwork to launch a product. They've been through design, they've been through research, prototyping exercises, and now they're here to showcase their progress and then to talk about what happens next after that. We have our panel of esteemed judges, many of you who are here. Thank you all so much for showing up and giving each of these teams attention, asking them hard questions. They will be judging all of these teams based on 4 categories in order to determine the winner today. The 4 categories: 1, prototype. Is the proposed project realistic? Can the team accomplish its stated goals within $1,500 in 90 days? 2, pitch. The ability to describe the problem, the solution, and the market opportunity. 3, impact. Could this team and solution have a substantial impact on the market and the environment and people's lives? And then 4, progress. Did the teams accomplish their stated goals, and have they continued working on the next steps that come after that? So judges are looking at progress via prototype pitch, business model, and impact. At the start of this competition, every one of these teams received $1,500 in prototyping grants. And today they will be competing for, in 3rd place, they will be receiving an additional $1,000. Oh, I thought that was like the beginning of applause, and I was like, no, 1K is not bad, right? 1K is not bad. 2nd place team, $2,000. Yeah. And for 1st place team, they're going to get a whopping $3K. The 1st and 2nd place teams will also be invited to represent PSU in the Invent Oregon Innovation Challenge that's taking place later this year. So let's get into it, right? All right, kicking us off today is EasyDapt, a team that is trying to support children with mobility issues by creating a solution to toys such as ride-on cars accessible. They seek to not only provide support for organizations providing services to families of children with disabilities, but they hope to revolutionize the toy industry to be more inclusive. Please give a big hand to Nick Lekis, Danae Murphy, and Aiden Twan.
So, hi everyone, we are EasyDapt. I'm Aiden, this is Danae, this is Nick, and this is Ben. So, as many of you are wondering, what exactly are we? What is EasyDapt? Why do we have this kind of catchy but also silly name? So, our story begins with us, and most particularly Nick, our founder here. So, Nick here has been working at a nonprofit organization called Go Baby Go. And Go Baby Go itself, it's an organization that helps children with accessible or disabilities and have them sort of connect them with vehicles. These vehicles are essentially their wheelchairs. That's how they get around. That's how they access different locations. It's all about accessibility. So we talk about how these are sort of our problems. And the biggest problem in Go Baby Go is when Nick, during Christmas, kept working on their orders. Because these cars, they break down. They need to be fixed. They need to have these children's devices installed. But Nick's only one person. He can only work on maybe 10, at most 15 of these cars in one Christmas. And that's him without taking a break. So aside from him being sad, the biggest problem is children being sad. They're not getting their Christmas gifts. They're not being able to ride around in cars. They're not being able to sort of go where they want to go. That's a big problem. So we have come up with a solution. And the solution itself is very simple. It looks exactly just like this. A bunch of wires, a USB cable, but obviously, that's everybody's nightmare everybody who is an engineer. So we have developed this kind of modular device where we call it Easy Adapter. And this will interface with children's cars. They will make these cars and make these control systems much, much more easier for them to use. It will give children who are potentially disabled or have problems with their motor controls a new way to control their vehicles. It will give these parents, a new way to ensure their children's safety, to ensure their children's fun, and to ensure their children's excitement when exploring. So again, we can give both children and parents such a control. And it's all about changing accessibility. Because when you look at this picture here, and this is exactly in our model back there, this is a traditional ride-on cars dashboard. It's clunky, and yes, it looks obviously easier than our regular steering wheels and in our regular vehicles, but to children who are suffering from disabilities, this is very, very clunky. And so we're changing the nature of accessibility. We want to make accessibility more accessible. We want to make it so that everyone can benefit, not just people with disabilities, not just people who are in need of such a vehicle, but everyone can again rise together. And when we're talking about that, we also want to talk about simply who we're targeting. Because ideas are ideas, they're great, but we also need to know who our most valued communities are, who our most valued customers, our target demographics are. And it's very clear here. Parents, of course, from 25 to 50 years old, no matter their occupation, no matter their gender, no matter who or what they are, as long as they want or have children already. These are our target demographics. And most importantly, we did some preliminary market research, and we noticed that around 65% of all United States parents, that's right, 65% of them value their children's safety above all else in terms of purchasing toys, purchasing products, purchasing whatever they want for their children. So it's a very huge and very untapped market. And so we go to our market sizes here. Well, again, through our preliminary research, we noticed that there's about like 25 million people in our total accessible market. That's the population of parents within the United States. 65% of that, 16 million, and then some. And then we come to our targeted market, which is our final one. And that's about 0.06% of our 16 million, which leaves us with about 10,000 people. 10,000 people, 10,000 units. One parent, one unit, one child, one unit, one family, one unit. So this is the value we bring. Because when we're developing such a product, we notice that we can go more than just safety, more than just accessibility. We notice that when we're devising this, we can understand that a simple motor, a simple modular device that we have can connect to anything that has electronics and a motor within. So this is the value we bring. We give people this kind of care, this kind of product where it can help accessibility in these kind of vehicles or for children themselves. But there's more to it than that. And that's who we are. That is EasyAdapt because we're innovative, we're accessible, we're easy. And let's get to it. Thank you very much.
All right. So obviously you guys have done something really amazing, which is to jump into the sort of mod culture of people tricking out what they like and turning that into, something that's frankly a blind spot in a huge industry. So thank you guys for sharing that. We have a few questions from the judges. First, your team is really diverse in areas of study. What have you been able to learn from each other through working on this project?
I think for me, for sure, it's talking to Aiden. Three of us are electrical engineers. Aiden's a business person. I still don't understand what half the words come out of his mouth, but it's really interesting to kind of get dragged along through this market research stuff that I had never considered looking into.
Yeah. For me personally, listening to others three speak, especially when it comes to circuits and mechanics, sometimes it's my worst nightmare being relived, and I have some post-traumatic stress disorder, come up again. But it is very informative and very knowledgeable for me to understand what is going on behind the mechatronics and the tech that makes our products come to life.
Right, next, throughout your prototyping process, what key elements have you held on to and what has dramatically changed via testing?
Go ahead.
I think that when we started, we just wanted to make adding these accessibility features easier. We wanted to help Go Baby Go be able to install their units easier and make there be less electrical failures by eliminating the need to cut wires and solder, and potentially get this into the hands of the parents that aren't able to get these devices just because Go Baby Go isn't able to meet demand and there aren't any commercially available products that do this. But as we've been going on, we've realized that this is a lot bigger than that. Accessibility is something that everybody needs, not just people with disabilities, and that creating a module like this that anybody is able to install onto a toy with a motor, which is a lot of toys, including these pseudo wheelchairs for kids. We've made a lot of, there's a lot of things that we can add to this, that we can connect to this, which is part of what makes it so special about it being modular and easy to install. So I think that we've just expanded upon that.
And then last, you talked about building a community. Can you guys share more about why this is important?
Yes, absolutely. It's because, again, we are today, an entire community, we're all sitting in this room, but I think it's more important than that. It's simply because no matter what kind of person you are in society, no matter what kind of person you are, we all need to be sort of together. It's sort of this unifying sense that transcends both cultural borders, street borders, national borders. It's all about creating community, and that's what Easy Adapt do. It makes it accessible for everyone. It levels the playing field for everyone and lets everyone rise together as a unifying and collective force.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Easy Adapt. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
The PSBA is so excited this year to support Cleantech founders. It's one of our favorite competitions of the year, partly because students get to get their hands on something. It's not just something they can go to a coffee shop. And so with our 2,000 square feet of wet lab space and 40,000 square feet of office space, we were so excited to house some of those innovations in-house this year, to really give a space where students could continuously find a place that fit well. But one of the parts that makes Cleantech Challenge special for us is that it's really the beginning of that journey for so many founders, where they go from a student at Portland State to one that has a problem they've identified and cared about, to experimenting with the solution at Cleantech before they go on to inventor and hopefully eventually finding a home at the PSBA, a place where they now have that solution that they're just trying to scale to make impact, where they can use that founder coaching and that mentor network and fundraising support as they really try to scale impact itself. And so we're excited not only to support Cleantech founders today as they first get into that journey and that new identity, but hopefully we'll eventually see them and have a home for them at the PSBA.
The different units of PSU, as you've seen, their Propel network comes together in really important ways to support student innovation. So our next team is looking to solve the ecological impacts of the monoculture system, specifically grain economies. They plan to do this by creating low-impact, ecologically sustainable hemp foods, starting with hemp microgreens. They are also why I might still have flecks of green in my teeth right now. Thank you. Let's give a warm welcome to
Awesome. Always good to clear your throat before you start talking. Awesome. Hi, I'm CB, the founder of Dicot, a hemp sciences company. What that means is I'm passionate about hemp foods. And that goes back to the fact that I have an inflammatory disease known as IBS, and cannabis and hemp have been super helpful for helping me deal with the day-to-day symptoms associated with this. And I'm not alone. Millions of Americans every day struggle from inflammatory illnesses and have sought refuge in cannabinoid-based products. Inflammaging diseases, as they're typically known, run the gamut from things like diabetes to chronic illness and things like joint and inflammation. The current challenge, however, is that most hemp-based products are not legal or too expensive to grow, whereas we see it have huge environmental downsides to their current market approaches. And this is where Dicot steps in. We believe that the symptoms of inflammaging diseases that people commonly use cannabinoid-based products for can be treated through a novel hemp food approach. That approach being milligreens, which are our term for hemp microgreens. Milligreens are a delicious, nutritious, and as many people saw today, easy to get stuck in your teeth way of exploring nutritional benefits without the intoxicating effects of cannabinoids that cause the plant to face such regulatory scrutiny. In particular, milligreens are known to have a kind of molecule called canflavins, which deliver an anti-inflammatory effect 30 times as potent as aspirin. That puts it in leagues like compounds like turmeric and other commonly used nutritional products. But what makes us so excited about milligreens, outside of the product perspective, is the implications it has for a growing industry that has lost its direction. Currently, hemp farmers are facing massive amounts of economic contraction because the market is simply oversaturated. In Oregon, 2 years ago, you could sell a pound of hemp for over $2,000. Today, you'd be lucky to get $500. We believe that farmers in this industry and others would benefit tremendously from licensing our patented process for growing milligreens to bring it to consumers across the country. This decentralized model has tremendous upsides when viewed through an environmental lens, simply because it's an alternative to the monocropping, highly processed-focused agricultural systems for growing cannabinoid-based crops like marijuana or hemp CBD. And this is not an insignificant market. nor is the advantages we have anything to be dismissed. Milligreens is one of the first companies that has gone and done the regulatory legwork to get FDA approval in order to sell our product to consumers. Cannabinoids as a class of compounds are heavily regulated and not capable of being sold in foods because they're also used in making drugs. Why it's important to get federal approval is because there is tremendous amounts of federal funding in the form of grants and other subsidies available to farmers and other agricultural organizations that are invested in growing foods, not just for our markets, but for the world. By obtaining GRAS status, we put ourselves in a pretty prestigious league, that being of Manitoba Harvest, our key competitor. Manitoba Harvest sort of symbolizes the massive economic potential for re-envisioning hemp food as a primary way of growing the crop. At $14.6 billion, that's not very small. And a 15% growth rate, we believe the global hemp market is certainly an obtainable market after 10 years of growth. Our initial focus on the Pacific Northwest is similarly not significant. With over 3,000 licensed hemp and marijuana farmers, each of with a potential contender for growing our Milligreens product, we believe accessing new farmers to bring our product to consumers is very doable. But what did we do in Cleantech to help make that possible? We established that it's not enough just to make a good product, you have to help consumers connect with that product. And so we explored how to grow the pie, so to speak, how to get consumers interested in Milligreens, a product that has helped me personally and one I depend on a lot. Our solution was a DIY sprouting kit, and we spent the 60 days developing a variety of materials and packaging approaches to innovate ways of sharing our products with consumers while we onboard new licensees. In the years to come, Dicot hopes to become a shelf staple at grocery stores and farmers markets across the Pacific Northwest and eventually the country. And in the meantime, we're counting on our sprouting kit to get consumers excited and join us at the table. Thank you for your time today, and I look forward to answering any questions.
Awesome. Well, I'm definitely rethinking my roast beef sandwich that I had earlier today. Few questions from our judges. First, what has been the most difficult part of blending science, health, and sustainability in developing micrograins?
I think it's like knowing when to shut up, but no, seriously, it's knowing how to articulate passion in a way that's accessible to others. I have to use foods that help inflammation because I have underlying health conditions. And while I believe everybody would benefit from them, it's hard to get people to try stuff that has a lot of historical baggage. By using what I know about the plant, science, and people, I've been able to, I think, develop a pretty novel solution through the DIY sprouting kit that makes Milligreens a little more comfortable and easier to try.
What are some of the secondary environmental effects that investing more resources into microgreens can have?
So we are really optimistic about minimizing waste as sort of a philosophy. In our sprouting kit, we use hemp in a couple different ways. We have hemp seeds, obviously, to grow the microgreens, but we're also using hemp fiber grow mats, which is an application for waste products that are usually made when you're growing hemp for seeds. So that reapplication lets us upcycle goods. And then the third and most difficult that we're still figuring out is using hemp plastics in order to make our sprouting trays. This again takes advantage of traditional waste products, upcycles it, and establishes ourselves as like a leader, and speaks to how when you don't just think about cannabis as weed, but instead think about hemp as a plant with a multitude of benefits and potentials for different markets and places, opportunities arise.
Last question. What has been the biggest surprise that your journey with Dicot has provided?
I think it's always hard, especially when we have such a passion for something, to make it and not have that be immediately apparent to other people. Without Cleantech, I don't think I would have dealt with the problem of demand generation and sharing my passion and making it translatable as head-on as I did. By addressing how to make people as excited in Milligreens as I am and identifying that they just have to try them like I did, I grew a lot and realized that, words are as powerful as actions, and sometimes you need to show and demonstrate rather than tell. And this experience has been really helpful for that reminder.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Dicot.
Thanks, Topi.
At the Center for Entrepreneurship, we host annual events to help inspire PSU students along their innovation journey. This starts in the fall term with Kickstart Weekend, a 3-day intensive where students work through the concepts of ideation, rapid prototyping, business modeling, and market validation. The weekend culminates with teams pitching to their peers and a panel of mentor judges. In 2021, we partnered with the Center for Retail Leadership to offer a truly unique experience. Kickstart Weekend, Consumer Goods Edition. Special guests from Portland's startup community were invited in as speakers, mentors, and judges. We are immensely proud of what each team brought forward, inspired by their collaboration, and look forward to seeing their future endeavors.
Kickstart Weekend is an incredible opportunity to meet your fellow students and work through an idea. The Center for Entrepreneurship often considers it the first step in the journey to clean tech and encourages all PSU students who have an interest in how an idea becomes a reality to check it out. Our next team, Breathe It Clean, is working on reusing biowaste to create wall plaster that acts as a moisture passive regulator and pollutant remover, further improving indoor air quality and comfort. Join me in welcoming Alessandra Ranesi.
So, good afternoon, everybody. I hope I have enough voice for you to hear me this afternoon. I'm presenting Breathe It Clean. Some of you already passed by my desk. And I will just shortly present the team. So it's my idea, and I've been assisted here by Tom Bennett and mentored by Dr. Gal, which is not here, sadly, today. I would like to introduce a little bit the idea and where it was coming from. So this is here a map released by Global Burden of Disease in 2019 with asthma rates all over the world. So it's easy to see that asthma is kind of a real issue here in the US and also in England, for example. And so which are the triggers of asthma? Some of those are the air pollution and also very low or very high relative humidity levels indoor. This was one of my thoughts at the beginning of this journey, and the other is that there are different countries also all over the world that are in energy security risk. So the other issue I would say is the energy costs generally. So there are countries like the ones I'm coming from, in Europe, like Italy, Spain, and Portugal, that are like, in this case, would be in the quartile 3, so they are not high energy risk, but they are still in energy risk, and that's why a lot of people wouldn't be using mechanical filtration system because of the cost of energy, and it's happening sometimes also with the heating system. I've seen it. So these two ideas brought me to the thinking about the possibility of having a passive mitigation for the air pollution. The final goal is to ensure a better indoor air quality, of course. And the product I would develop and I'm developing is a plaster, which is based on powdered gypsum. So it's a plaster based on gypsum, which would be improved with this biowaste coming from a tree, which is an invasive tree from Australia, but really spread all over the world, which is called Acacia delbata. So this biowaste is added to the gypsum and the plaster is made, and then the plaster is used. Already they use plasters a lot in Europe to coat walls and ceilings indoor, and in other kind of plaster for the outdoor. Anyway, this is a schematic like representation of how the plaster would work. So that would be passive removal of some VOCs, of carbon dioxide, eventually ozone, which are like the pollutant I've tested so far. And I've been like testing the plaster itself, but also the biowaste. And this is the prototype I brought today. And some of you have seen like how this bark of the plant is able to absorb CO2 from the air. what about what are the benefits that we can have? So we can have, of course, a building product with a reduced carbon footprint. So we have less bio-waste and producing a bigger amount and volume of plaster. We would have healthier indoor with higher air quality. And this is a product that is easy to purchase. I would say it's easy to buy on the internet, like the normal websites where we buy things. So this is the name of my group. Thank you for listening to me. If you have any question, you can make the question now or reach me to my email address. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alessandra. No, you're perfect. I think it's fascinating to think about how we as living beings interact with the built environments that we create. So it's really a fun opportunity to think about that here. Let's see what the judges found fascinating. We've got 3 questions. First, can you share some of the ways that you hope to install the plaster to further test it?
So can you repeat the ways you hope to install the plaster to further? Okay, yes, of course. So once I'm kind of trying to get the best recipe, let's say, for the plaster, so I'm still working on the amount of bark, crushed bark I would put into that. I'm trying to test different temperature for thermal treating the bark, for example. Once I have this final product, the idea is, of course, to, after running some tests, which are normal tests for building materials, I would like to apply that in a real room and simulating the normal use, eventually the room of someone that I know, eventually a bedroom, which are the rooms in which there are we normally stay with everything closed for 8 hours sleeping, so the air pollution is normally getting kind of high at the end of the night. And I would like to monitor that and the function, how it's working actually, the plaster, for sure.
Next question.
Okay.
You're working with some pretty in-depth science here. Have you thought through ways to make the technology accessible to the average consumer?
Yeah, I would say that this technology is kind of accessible already, because it's something that you can decide to buy and apply to your wall, but you can also just decide to use it during a refurbishment of your place, for example. So once it's there, you apply it, or a builder apply it for you, and then it's there for 10 years, 20 years, or whatever you want to change it, of course. I wouldn't say it's difficult.
Yeah. And then, besides a construction material, are there other ways that this material could benefit people?
Yeah. Well, for sure, it's really interesting in general to find a way of using this plant, which is it represents a problem nowadays, because it's invasive, it's not letting other plants to live, and it's also spreading a lot of the fires. So there are many issues with this plant. Of course, it would be great to find a different destination for the bio-waste of the plant, also to make it more affordable economically, the mechanical removal of the plant all over the country. I've tested it alone, and I've tested this material for the purpose I have as a building material with gypsum, but I'm confident that could be also added to other kind of materials, or could be used eventually in a filtration system, even if I never study it, and I can't say for sure it's working, but it's a possible. Eventually, it's possible that it's gonna work too. Yeah.
Excellent. Cool.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Bye.
All right, so at the beginning of this, we mentioned the fabulous prizes that these teams are competing for, but Climate Curious wanted to add a little something to the pile. In April, we're partnering with TAO, the Technology Association of Oregon, on an Earth Day summit called the Cleantech Symposium. It's a half-day summit. There's a very business-appropriate lunch. We're going to have the speakers just packed with all kinds of stellar points of view. We have Reed. We have people who work on sustainability with experience in like Lululemon, Walmart, Nike, Amazon, a ton of local experts, organizations, startups. The goal of the day is to give Oregon tech leaders concrete things to do to help fight climate change. If you're curious to check it out, you can go to the Climate Curious website or TAO website. Registration's open now, but there's going to be such good content there, such good hobnobbing experiences. We want to make sure that the future of climate tech in Portland is able to be represented there as well. So Climate Curious and TAO are coming together to give a free ticket to every member of the top 3 teams. Abigail's good at looking like, that's like, oh, so generous, making it rain over here. Are we back from, okay, cool. So now that we've made it rain, tickets to business professional situations. Let's get to our next team. This is Team Bucha. They are tackling one of the issues that results in waste and pollution from apparel manufacturing. Using kombucha SCOBY, they're looking to develop a technology to process sustainable fabrics for clothing. Please give a big hand to Pablo V. Casares and Eva Zavala.
How's it going? Yeah? You ever get on a stage and realize you need to pay for parking and go to the bathroom and everything else? I'm Pablo. I'm the team lead for Team Bucha. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to my pitch. I am an apparel professional. I used to work as a technical designer and a product developer with a local company. And I got to go to factories in India, in China, in Peru. I was very involved with the manufacturing process. And the company I worked for had every environmental certification, passed every audit. It was really some of the best. But something always felt just a little bit wrong. It was never quite right. As consumers and as manufacturers, we're all trying to make the right decision. Nobody's trying to kill the environment. We're all trying to do the best we can. But it's never quite enough with the way the industry is set up. Polyester, for example, full of microplastics. And even after manufacturing, once you wash it in the laundry, that also releases these microplastics into the oceans. Microplastics recently have been found in freshly fallen snow in Antarctica. Cotton seems like a great solution because it's a natural fiber. But cotton is considered one of the crops that uses the most water of all agricultural crops. The dyes used to color the cotton are usually carcinogenic. They poison the waterways. And to make one leather jacket, you have to clear about 1,000 square meters of land, and that land is usually rainforest. It seems pretty dim, and it seems like we don't have a lot of solutions. That is when I realized that all apparel textiles in production currently harm the environment, all of them. It feels a little bit like we're always in this position where we need to choose the lesser of two evils. But what if we didn't have to choose evil at all? What if we could just choose something that was actually good? To make clothing manufacturing sustainable, you need to invest in new biotextiles. Biotextiles can grow, they can biodegrade, they don't poison the waterways and ruin the climate and the oceans and the air and everything else like these other products all do. And if we're serious about changing the fashion industry, we need to find new answers. And that answer is kombucha. Why kombucha? What is kombucha? Kombucha is a very popular fizzy drink that you can find at 7-Eleven. Kombucha brews, or rather grows, in a very particular way. Do you see that goop on top of the booch there? That goop is bacterial cellulose, and it's something that protects the kombucha and also lets the kombucha become kombucha. That bacterial cellulose, that goop, is a viable alternative for leather. To make a leather jacket, you need a cow, a lot of land, a lot of water. You end up with a lot of emissions. It just takes a lot. To make a leather jacket out of kombucha, you need a little bit of sugar and some tea. So how do you actually make it? You take this little bit of booch, a little starter booch, and you put it in some water with some tea and a little sugar. You wait about 2 weeks, And in that 2-week period, the kombucha will have covered to fill the top of your tank. You take it out, you let it dry. If you want to, you put a little beeswax for waterproofing, and you have kombucha leather. That is all there is to it. There's a lot of really amazing things that could come from this. Replacing leather itself would have tremendous effects on the environment, on people's lives who work with this stuff, on the rainforest, but we think we can take it even farther. The next steps in this is we're looking to extrude kombucha. There's a way to take the bacterial cellulose and refine it down and create yarns from it. And what this means is that theoretically, we could replace cotton and polyester in the manufacturing process as well. The fashion industry itself would be totally revolutionized and is in need of a refresh. Right now, the market is really unpredictable and turnaround times are getting much, much tighter. Just in an industrial sort of way, the fashion industry needs a simpler, saner, and more sustainable solution as well. We all love recycling, but we're just recycling the same ideas over and over again right now, and we need fresh, innovative take in order to actually sustain our planet and keep wearing clothes without guilt. My name is Pablo, and I'm the team lead with Team Bucha, and I hope you'll join me and my team on creating sustainable solutions for the future. Together, we can create sustainable clothing, clean the waterways, possibly even save the world. Thank you.
Love that your idea is not only something that's born from your experience, but also something that, at least in Portland, we all have a little bit of experience on kombucha world. Some questions from the judges. First being, where would you like to take your prototype next? What resources could make expanding your research more feasible?
What we need is a laboratory, a little time, and a little bit of science. The extrusion process is chemically pretty simple and pretty clean, but I myself don't quite have the knowledge for it, so I need some expert advice and a little bit of time to create these extruded yarns. Once those yarns are created, from my own apparel experience and my team member Ava's experience, we could spin these yarns and create a knitted or woven sample.
All right. It's wonderful that you came up with this solution based on your own needs as a designer. As you expand, who do you see as your largest potential customer?
Our largest potential customer to start will likely be middle-aged progressive adults who are interested in eco solutions. But the goal is to make kombucha leather and kombucha textiles so ubiquitous that it's just a normal textile. We don't think about it. I want it to be something you pick up at the store and say, oh, this is nice, and it's not necessarily the fresh, fancy eco-ness of it that sells it. I want it to be as comparable and as normal and as comfortable as everything else.
And can you share some ways in which you would like to expand and globalize this technology?
What I see my personal way to take this is as a mill, as a factory that creates yardage for brands to buy from. And that could mean that we could go global. We could have also community neighborhood factories creating kombucha. This could potentially bring back domestic manufacturing in a really big way, and then send those off to brands that send them off everywhere else. It seems like it's a very close-in community solution and also a worldwide one.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Team Bucha.
Thank you so much.
So we support students in many ways, but one of the most important ones is helping them to be educated about the value of IP and give them the information they need to be very thoughtful about what they do with their own innovations, regardless of what direction they're going to take, how they're going to interact with the Center for Entrepreneurship. For students that go to the Cleantech Challenge, we very often work with them in assessing their specific ideas that they're very passionate about, and occasionally we'll help them with IP filings, thinking about things like non-disclosures, etc. Our office is super passionate about making an impact with ideas. That really drives everything that we do. We work with not only students but faculty with that as our core value, and almost everything we do is really on a mission to make an impact with innovations that are coming out of the PSU community.
Thank you to Travis and the team at IIP for ensuring that faculty and students have the support they need to keep innovating. Our next project is inspired by a topic that hits close to home for many of us, wildfires. Artemis is working on a solution to repurpose the carbon created by wildfires in Oregon with their very own system. Through this system, they hope to convert carbon waste into carbon black, usable in cosmetic products. It's my pleasure to introduce Romita Shaker.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I am Romita Shaker, and today I'm going to talk to you about my journey of bringing about a sustainable solution to major sources of air pollution, and not only stopping there, but also creating something useful for consumers to use at the end of the day. My constant love for learning has brought me to this stage, and I'm ever thankful for Cleantech to allowing me to explore an extra field, which is engineering. Moving on. The inspiration, I came to Oregon in 2019 from India, and after a life-changing event, my marriage. But then it didn't, life had something else in store for all of us. 2020, COVID hit. But it didn't stop there for us Pacific Northwesterners, did it? We had wildfires, one after the other. It was scary because it was very new to me, but it opened my eyes to the reality of air pollution and the effects it has and the health hazards that it causes to humans. It was then that I started thinking about solutions which could be brought about to change this. And you can see here, there are different sources for this particulate matter pollution. But what's the problem? The problem is that the particulate matter is so small. These fine particulate matters, when they enter the respiratory system, they cause a lot of health hazards, including respiratory and cardiovascular diseases. And it also is one of the leading causes for premature deaths and is ranked among the top 10 risk factors for death. Given this information, I sought to see what is happening in Oregon. In Oregon, California, and Washington, the Environmental Protection Agency has deemed that we wouldn't be able to meet the basic particulate matter standards set by the Environmental Protection Agency. And that standard is actually less stringent than what has been set by the WHO. And this is the recent backlash happening in the society in 2023. And that is why this problem is very important and pertinent to Oregon and the Pacific Northwest. So the whole idea is to make a friend out of a nemesis. This is a simple three-step process that I'm trying to bring about, where I want to capture all these carbon particles in my contraptment, and then I want to purify it so that it could be used to make many useful consumer products, starting with cosmetics. Because it hits close to home, as a lot of indigenous communities still burn oil to make cosmetics. So this is my journey as to what happened during this Cleantech competition. So there were a lot of iterations as to how I started going about my project. So I utilized the grant funds to bring about all these different testings and methods. And this is the final product, the Artemis retrofit, which I have as a prototype right now. So the market for both these Artemis retrofit and the retro, so the retrofit is basically the contraptment, is the carbon capture and utilization and storage market, where you can see like there's a 15% compounded annual growth rate. And also in the recovered carbon black market, there is like a 32.5% compounded annual growth rate. All of this show that there's a huge potential, and this is the need of the hour for people to bring about solutions in this particular industry. And you can also see there is a lot of funding opportunities, especially within Oregon, where the state government is pushing towards creating retrofits which would fill in the diesel exhausts. And sorry. You would also see the target customers. It hits way deep because right now, a lot of cosmetics are made with lead, heavy metals, and cadmium. So if we're able to bring about a sustainable solution which people can use and know that it's going to help them out, that is going to be a game changer. So the next steps, I want to focus on furthering the various mechanical configurations to capture more particulate matter, work on refining this and how it could be used in different applications, and explore other solar alternatives to make this more eco-friendly. And at the end of the day, think about scalability to the wildfires as well. And moving on, I also have some strategic partnerships which I'm trying to form with different cosmetic companies and also with potentially the government and other agencies. So I couldn't have gone this far without all of you, so thank you so much. And I want to extend a warm invitation to the rest of you who are not on the list to please join the list and help me make make a friend out of our nemesis, air pollution. Thank you.
Excellent. Talk about a phoenix story of beauty rising from the ashes. This is really cool to hear. Questions from the judges. Can you share with us some of your goals for making this scalable?
Yes. So the goals right now is to start small and see how this works in the existing retrofits, and then collect more data, then try to make it more scalable. Because we need to understand what kind of pressure, especially the air pressure, which is needed to scale this up. Because when there's static air, we need a lot of pressure to suck in the air into the contraptment. So that is what would be the next step towards scalability.
You're focusing now on the cosmetic market. Mm-hmm. What additional areas do you plan to test into next?
Yes, that's a very good question. So carbon is there in everything. So carbon is made up in a lot of things, and the useful things are tires in your cars. They are basically white in nature, and carbon is added to make it black. So the rubber industry, and also carbon is a very good insulator, so it could also be used in the wire industries where they insulate all the wires. So there's a lot of uses towards that.
Last question, what are the biggest challenges that you need to overcome to make this a reality?
The biggest challenges is going to be the funding, because this is not a simple project. It's something which we're trying to fight against, which is abstract. So it's going to require a lot of data and tests to be run. So it's going to require man hours and funding. So that is going to be the biggest challenge.
All right. Thank you, Artemis.
Yes, thank you.
So quick heads up to our judges. We have concluded the pitches, so if you have not finished up and submitted your scores, you've got about 2 minutes to do so. So pop out those tablets, recalibrate anything you need to recalibrate, and make sure we get those in. So all the teams presenting here today are inspirations. We can't wait to see what the future holds for each of the innovators. Each of the team has made incredible progress through this journey, and we really look forward to seeing what's next. So while our judges are finishing tabulating their scores, and we wait to hear who's taking home the top prizes, we'd like to welcome a guest, Arsh Haq. They are the director of the Portland State Business Accelerator, and they have mentored countless startups. Being a founder themselves, it's no surprise that they use their capital in the startup space to be a voice for entrepreneurs. They're committed to helping founders be on that ever-present push for funding. Please welcome Arsh Haq.
Rad. So thanks to Abigail, the Center for Entrepreneurship, Portland State University, and to all of those here. I very much like hearing the sound of my own voice, but when there's an audience, it's a little bit more fun. I used to work at TED, teaching people how to give TED Talks, and it's been a couple of years since I did any of that, so a little out of practice. But one of my favorite versions of a TED Talk is just telling a handful of stories. So I think that's what I'll do today. A couple of stories about what shaped how I think about founding and startups, and then a couple of stories about my startups themselves. So whenever I was 18, I got admitted into a liberal arts program in college. And so even before courses started, I went to campus early to hear a guest speaker and have a seminar about a book. The guest speaker was Lieutenant General Josiah Bunting III, which was as intimidating of a presence as the name evokes. Before the person came in, Dr. Gregg, the director of the program I was part of, said that the Lieutenant General was the kind of person that when they came into the room, your posture is a little bit better, you articulate a little more carefully, and everything that followed checked out much the same. And so he was a Rhodes Scholar, a concert pianist. He was the former head of the Virginia Military Institute and argued in front of the Supreme Court about the case. He wrote a book called An Education of Our Time, where he talked about how all students in their first year of college should memorize 4,000 lines of poetry, because that's what he did. And so as you can imagine, it was a startling experience of like, oh, so this is what college is going to be. At some point, I think he was just wearing a short sleeve dress shirt, which was sort of at odds with his 6'2" demeanor. But I think he had something like a tattoo on his shoulder. And so one of my friends asked, like, I see that you have a tattoo. Is there any story behind that? And he says in a sort of consonant voice that all tattoos are a testament to eternity or to the moment. And in my case, it was whenever I got pissed drunk with all of my comrades when I joined the military, and it was a testament to that night. And I think about startups a little bit in the same way, particularly when coupled with the book that we were reading for that seminar. It was a book by Louis L'Amour, who is a Western author. He's written something like 150 books, thousands of stories. And in the book that we were reading, we talked about a chapter somewhere halfway through, where we talked about how Louis L'Amour, the story that he was most proud of specifically, came from this moment where he was a youth, he was in the desert, he was dehydrated, bordering on about to die because he did not have access to water. And there it was, a mirage in the distance, some potential of a town, and then it was actually there, and he didn't die, and then he wrote a story, and he was super proud of it. But the lesson learned from all of that was some stories are worth telling and aren't worth living. The bizarre conclusion from that chapter was specifically that he wishes, despite it being the best story he thinks he's ever written, he still wishes he didn't almost dehydrate and die in the desert. And I think startups are a little bit like all of that. Stories sometimes worth telling, but sometimes hard to live through, sometimes a testament to eternity, where you have reshaped the world around your idea, but more often than not, a testament to the moment. The idea that you have in your mind and the alchemy and the magic that comes from translating that into something that is real, that you get to see with your friends. And so I'm someone who by no means has the same sort of staggering presence as Lieutenant General Josiah Bunting III. But if you know me, I sometimes get paid to tell stories for a living and like to tell stories that reflect well upon me. I've raised hundreds of millions of dollars for startups. I have founded a couple of my own, saw an exit, gone to prestigious schooling, yada, yada, yada. Things that I actually find difficult to tell because it seems disingenuous, but in this room, I think I get to share the other sides of those sentences. What are the stories of startups as actually lived rather than just told? And do that by telling a couple of the stories of my startups. The first of which is the first startup that I ever founded, and that came from essentially being so bad at Spanish, I got a job offer. So the mechanics of the story are that when I was a teenager and heading into early college, I was on the med school track. And so I often would partner with an organization in Kentucky that was a nonprofit that did medical mission trips. And at first I was assisting with the surgeries, which was bizarre and difficult. And at some point I decided that I wanted to transition from being a doctor to getting into policy. And so my mentor at the time was friends with the First Lady of Guatemala. And so I was like, suit and tie, and getting ready to like meet and practicing like a little script that I had like in my head over and over and over again. And so we get into the room and it's me, my mentor, and the First Lady of Guatemala. And my mentor says all of these things, but here's the progress of our nonprofit and future partnerships that we want to have. And here's someone that I'm mentoring, and they'll introduce themselves. And I get through my whole script and I'm like bumbling and fumbling through it. And at some point I mix up two words that it doesn't seem like that much to mix up two words, but it was something like aprender and enseñar. But I accidentally said, instead of, I came to Guatemala in order to learn Spanish and English and practice, I have come to Guatemala to teach English. And so the First Lady of Guatemala says, oh, that's fantastic. We have a state orphanage and we're running low on English teachers. You should just go there and teach. And my mentor then says out to me, this is what happened. I'm not losing face. You're going to go teach English at the state orphanage of Guatemala. And so I did for the next 5 weeks. And it turns out that as I got there, what I stumbled upon was a larger problem, which was all of these students in Guatemala at the state orphanage who saw English as a way of leaving the circumstances of their birth and sort of where they were in that moment. And there weren't enough teachers. And so that was my sort of problem statement that I wanted to solve. Ended up going back to the US and forming Context, which was a nonprofit that connected students in Guatemala with students in Kentucky. You teach your native language while learning the one that you don't have. 30 minutes in English, teaching Spanish, 30 minutes in Spanish, teaching English, vice versa, all facilitated through webcams. And it went really well on paper. So built up the full organization, pitched it to the institutions, got MOUs, ended up pitching to the Minister of Culture of Guatemala and like securing all of that. We have this bumbling mistake that leads to what looks like success, and then I launched the pilot program and it's an utter failure. I don't know how to build products. I was like 19 and I just thought it would kind of work out as long as all the press releases were good. But we had, I think, a 15% attendance rate. It turns out getting high school students in Guatemala with college students in Kentucky to actually meet by webcam on this kind of sketchy, like no reputation nonprofit was harder than I thought. And so I shut it down a year and a half later. What people mostly hear about is maybe the funny story, definitely the Minister of Culture, and I usually don't bring up the pilot program quite as much, nor all the other elements involved. I still talk to a lot of the same people in Guatemala and have all of those relationships, and so if there was some parcel left behind of all these experiences, it was the relationships I formed along the way were meaningful. What I learned was certainly useful, even if the nonprofit or startup in this case didn't quite make it. The second story that I often talk about with regards to my experiences in startups is my first tech startup. So I spent a couple of years in the nonprofit industry, founding my own, working a couple of others, and at some point I realized that it wasn't efficacious enough, like it didn't quite translate to the change that I wanted to see in the world. And so my master's thesis literally was dismantling the master's tools, startups as a vehicle of social change. And so my whole premise was maybe startups could evoke the change and play within the system, where as a nonprofit I always felt like I was having to try and get the tiniest donations to start the tiniest of pilot programs in order to affect change, whereas convincing people to just give me revenue seemed like a better outlet. And so I did graduate school in Paris, France. I'm from Kentucky, and so this is a pretty big transition from Louisville, Kentucky to Paris, France. I actually didn't know what program I got into. I applied to a bunch of places in Europe because I thought that would be fun. And during my orientation, I get there and there's someone like prim and proper at the head of this like large Hogwarts-esque like cathedral of a room. And they say, and they're like spinning a small ring on their finger, and someone nudged me next to me and said like, do you know what that ring is? And I was like, no idea. It's an aristocracy ring, which I didn't know was a thing. And he goes on to speak and says, 11 of the 13 last French prime ministers have gone through this program and we expect a lot of you. I accidentally seemingly had got into the like French diplomacy school, and they're the only ones who gave me scholarships, so I was just there. I mean, it was good. I liked it a lot. But much like the first startup I had came from unexpected ways, my second and first tech startup came from a date that I never expected a date to turn into my first tech startup. And so there I was on a second date with someone from Poughkeepsie, New Jersey, and I gave them two options. I said, option one, there's this concert. I saw them first in an Apple ad in the early 2000s, that they seemed kind of cool. And the second was a film festival for Martin Scorsese. They chose the latter, and it was great. It was like lesser seen De Niro film that was kind of Joker-esque, and it was funny and all that. And so me and the person were coming back from this film festival whenever they get a text from the supervisor and like Paris correspondent. And what the text says was like, shots fired in the 13th arrondissement. And she's from Poughkeepsie, New Jersey, and I'm from Louisville, Kentucky, which has a lot of gun violence, which is terrible, but also I think desensitized me. We're like, I don't know, we're in a major city, this happens sometimes, like, no worries. And so we go get dinner, and there's like people roller skating outside, because that's really popular in Paris to go roller skating on Friday nights. And then it comes to my attention on like large, like sirens go off on like and the TVs all like switch the channel. And it turns out the concert I had recommended that we go to was the site of the Bataclan shooting in Paris. When I first moved to France, my whole spiel I gave to my parents at the time was like, it's Paris, France. Like, it's the safest place on earth. Where else could like I be safer than like among the like Ivy League of Paris? They entered a state of emergency for the next 2 years, the entirety of my graduate school program. And the reason I mention all of this is that that experience radically altered a whole lot about me. One of the reasons I don't do as much public speaking as I used to is that large crowds still resonate that trauma note, and it sometimes freaks me out a little bit. But flash forward a year from that date, flash forward a year of me going to no concerts for the next year, and I have a birthday party. And one of my friends is an engineer, and Ben has been talking to me, was in the Netherlands at the time, we've like corresponded a lot, and Ben says like, it's a bummer that you can't go to concerts anymore. I think I can build something that would help for that. And so Ben disassembles a medical machine called a trans-electrical nervous stimulation machine, a TENS unit, hooks it up to an iPod, and then sticks a bunch of electrical nodes on me. And what happens as a result is that the music, as it begins to play, begins to send small electrical stimulation, sometimes sharper or more subtle, some feels like a wave in the ocean. And I'm able for the first time in a year to really feel music the way I used to at a concert in this innovative way. And so we've gone from date to what feels like a meaningful innovation that was what we later would discover was patentable and interesting. And we had a lot of success. It was a really cool product. We started building things like demos around games, like video games, where you'd put the nodes on your back, and if the game was simulating flight, you'd feel these like slight like tingles of buzzing, and when you went soaring, you'd like feel it more intensely, and it simulated the fiction of flight. And it's the coolest thing I didn't build, to be clear. I'm not an engineer. I'm not capable of like anything sort of in that area, but that I got to participate in. And so we got to have all these notes, and then we ran out of money, which was a bummer, because I wasn't very good at fundraising at that time. I eventually learned how to do fundraising because I was really annoyed by it. But at the time, we had this idea, this great story, great press releases, this product that seemed like it could make a difference, this application unexpectedly in nursing homes and these B2B partnerships of, at nursing homes, they have insufficient stimulation who can have all of this impact. And we had a $250,000 check like 6 weeks away, and 6 weeks without payroll that I could deliver. And so I moved to California to get enough funds to close up shop, and the idea was done. Something that felt a lot like success in so many ways and has a lot of good stories again. In this case, didn't have all the tools to sort of get it to the end. And I think that actually gets to something I never thought of as a startup until I think this speech, which was I had done nonprofits, I'd done traditional tech startups, and towards the end of law school, right before or right as I was moving into Portland, I was done. If you can't imagine, the stories that are worth telling are often hard to live, and I had lived a lot of hard stories by the time that I closed my last tech startup. The pandemic had hit, I had a round like raised and like ready early 2020, and then it disappeared, and by November, I and everything else was gone. And I was crashing on a couch in Portland, and during that time, I went to all my mentors, who included all these like fancy people who were sitting on the board of my last tech startup, and I said, okay, I'm gonna go get a job. I've never tried that before, it seems interesting, I hear people do it all the time, and I was like, what can I be hireable about? I've done economic development work, I've done all these startups, I've worked in ed tech and was part of all these like innovations, and they said, Arsh, you're not hireable, at least not for everything that you do, except maybe one thing. A university accelerator. You like take all of the Venn diagrams and you like throw a dart right in the middle, and it's like fantastic. There's probably about like 6 of those in the country. This is fantastic. And lo and behold, Portland State University has a position that like opens up 9 minutes away from like where I lived at the time. And so I applied for the position just sort of on accident and get it. And over the next year, I think this is my like retirement essentially. Like I'm done, I've gone to the university, maybe I'll do some instruction, and I like have some grants that roll in, a $20,000 grant from Lemelson here, a $56,000 grant from Chase here, and slowly building up these products. And what I didn't realize or expect was that a lot of the skills that I had developed over time were still baked in. Like there wasn't just, I've hung up my hat, like picked up the 9 to 5 and I just move on. And I ended up building something that was really meaningful, something that a lot of people in this room are a part of. I'd gone through the best accelerators in the country, Techstars included, and I had never quite had the experience of what I wanted of, I was a founder, had startups, I wanted help, and I never quite got what I wanted. And through these grants, I started building a new type of model, one that specifically touched on every founder is different through the intersections of their identity, every startup is different, and most accelerators I had gone through were cookie cutter. They were designed for everyone, not for me, and I didn't quite fit. And what I've gotten to do through these grants is essentially explore a model that gets to meet people where they are. And I think of all the startups I've ever had, nonprofit, tech startup, it's actually as an entrepreneur, as part of a university, that I've been able to build the startup that I think we'll be able to get to the end of the journey. I've often been able to do tiny bits and get good stories from the startups that I've been a part of, but for the first time within an organization as an entrepreneur, it seems like I might be able to get to the other side. And to sort of end in the last minute or two of the speech, in addition to being able to run the accelerator for Portland State University, have been able to do some instruction. And a story that comes to mind is I used to do K through 12 teaching, and I used to teach 6th grade biology. And probably my favorite unit in 6th grade biology was about fish. And specifically, there's a little diagram, and it showed how fish are sometimes happy in certain medium temperature waters, but if you make it too cold or if you make it too hot, the fish dies, and that's a bummer. And then there's some waters where they're just really, really unhappy. And I think for me, one way I come to startups is, I am a fish in weird waters. I am a queer, polyamorous, mentally ill person of color. I was raised an Indian Muslim child of immigrants in the post 9/11 South. I'm as queer a fish as you get. And so for me, it has always been a desperate desire to try and find waters where I could survive. And I think that's often the inspiration for what founders have. Whether it's waters that they just want to, whether the water is just bluer on the other side of the bend, or whether it's water where you need to survive, that is often the instinct. And so I'll leave with the following note. The same book that I mentioned at the very beginning, An Education of a Wandering Man by Louis L'Amour, at the very, very end, he talks about how he was once on a train as a hobo in this case meaning a seasonal worker in the early 20th century, and he was reading up on the Silk Road. And something that merchants on the Silk Road would often say is not, I wish you good fortune, I wish you good weather. No, what they often said was, I wish there be a road. I hope there is a road for you. And I think that's what I leave for the current and future entrepreneurs and founders in the room, whether it is a nonprofit, a tech startup, or entrepreneur, the skills you've learned as a result of being in programs like this or had exposure to. I hope you find the waters you're looking for. I hope you find a road. And if I can be that road for you, please do reach out. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Arsh. If I'd have known this was the type of event where we're sharing drunken tattoo stories, I would have dressed differently, so my bad. Now, it's really fascinating and valuable to hear about how lived experience can be what creates and gives birth to innovation. So thank you so much. It's that time. The judges have submitted. If you haven't submitted by now, sorry. But really excited to be able to share for everybody those who are taking home awards from this year's Cleantech Challenge here at PSU. And we will also be learning who's going to be representing PSU at Invent Oregon coming up soon. But before we get to there, let's talk about third place. This is the 1K prize. Taking home the third place award and receiving $1,000. Please congratulate Artemis. Congratulations. Well done. So yeah. All right. All right. 2K, first team to represent PSU at Invent Oregon. Let's please welcome second place winner, Dicot. Good job. Yeah. Congrats, well done, great job. Well, thank you